Alrighty guys, so I just most recently picked up one of Broadway Limited's new Paragon 4 PRR I1SA decapods, 210Os. So I figured after having this model for about a week and kind of running it through its paces, I figured I'd do a review on the locomotive. I'm going to start off the first half kind of going over the details of the locomotive, and then second half of the video we'll do some sounds and on-track stuff. So I'm going to start in the front here. And again, this is the 210. I got it with the short tender. You can get a long haul tender version, but I opted for the short tender just because of my layout. Sometimes those long haul tenders just don't really work too well with my 22-inch curves. But this model actually on Broadway Limited's website says that minimum recommended radius is 18. And it handles 18 inches okay. 22 probably will be best for a minimum radius. I have 18s on my layout in some spots, and it kind of just gets through. But again, so we're going to go over the details of the locomotive, what I like about it, what I think Broadway Limited did a really good job at, and what I think that they didn't do a good job at, and some problems that I've already had in just a short week that I've had it. So up front here, we can see I already kind of start doing some mild weathering. These boards up here would have been wood, so I'm just trying to simulate the wood decking for the front foot plates here. This coupler is a different coupler. This actually came off of one of my scale train models that I took out the other one and put this one on. The locomotive won't come with these markings on it for the engine terminal locations and where the engine belongs. It'll just be a blank pilot. Luckily, I had some extra Penske steam locomotive decals left over, so I applied these. You have your cut lever here running across, and then your handrail also running on top of that. So the detail up front here on the pilot area is pretty decent. You have an air hose coming off the front. Some of these decapods in service actually did have the plates, the backing plates, put in at the step boards here. So you can just, if you want to model that, depending on the road number, use styrene sheet and put the backing plates in here at the footsteps. The first thing that I really notice on the front end here, detail wise, it really stands out, and I've tried to kind of correct it by painting over it to kind of fill it in a little bit, is on the two main reservoirs up here, the air reservoirs. There's a really bad mold seam that runs right around the tanks, and it stands out pretty good on camera. In person it's not as bad, but it's definitely just something that kind of jumps out and smacks you in the face if you're looking at it. Working up, really good smoke box rivet detail. Number board is good. Good handrail and step detail on the smoke box. The dynamo is placed lower here and the headlights higher, so this is going to be the later version of the decapods. The earlier versions would have had the more forward mounted headlight actually kind of down here where the dynamo is, and the dynamo would be sitting more or less where the headlight is. Good step detail on the supports here, the bracing for the pilot, and you have your main deck detail, which is really good. It's sitting on top of the reservoirs. I'm just going to kind of move the engine a little bit as we go. Working down the side of the locomotive on the engineer's side. Again, good detail and really prototypically accurate to what these look like in service. You have your control box here. This was one of the Penske's kind of early forms, as to what I understand, one of the Penske's early forms of their cab signaling system. So this would have been like your train control box right here that would have dealt with in-cab signaling for the railroad. Power reverser and good tubing detail, again, on the engineer's side. I'm not sure about the handrails on this side. They feel plastic. The stanchions feel metal. They feel really brittle. I'm going to see how long it holds up. I might end up taking them out, at least just the sides here, and replacing them with wire. The sand dome the sand dome piping is all separate. You have your piping coming down from the cab that goes down to the power reverse, which is all separate, which is really good prototypical detail. And then you have some extra lines coming off the top of the locomotive, off the steam dome, which is all separately applied. Looks really good. Up top, you have your 2 safeties. This would be your turret controls, which is right in here. Surface blowdown, which was a very big thing specific to the Pennsy. You see those on a lot of the Pennsy engines. And the one thing that I found kind of interesting was they give you a second whistle to put on. The whistle that came on this from the factory was the Banshee, and it's the small little short one. And if you want to change your whistle to the other PRR whistle that they have on the decoder, you can actually change the whistle out on the locomotive to a larger one to replicate that. Good bell detail. It's free swinging to a point. It doesn't really move that much, but it's not totally fixed. And again, good piping detail on the dynamo exhaust coming up behind the stack. Now, if you notice here, the front end of my smoke box is all caved in and messed up, and that's going to be a story for later in the video. But that's one of the problems that I've encountered so far. Good running gear detail. Everything runs smooth. I've already done, and it's a big thing that just it's a pet peeve of mine, that on steam locomotives, how they always have the center axle of the drivers non-painted. So I've gone through and painted all the centers on the axles. It just makes a cleaner overall look. Painted the front lead trucks as well black, because they're usually bare metal. Coming down the side, this side looks a lot clearer on the number, but on the other side, when I turn this thing around, you'll see it's kind of not that crisp and clear. I don't know if it was a misprint or it just didn't print that well, but the cab number on the fireman side is definitely a little blurrier, and you can definitely tell in the quality of it. Good firebox detail, has the ash pan skirting down the sides, which looks really good. Again, coming back up the top, you have an operating roof vent, slides back and forth to see cab detail. Nice thing is when you look down in, there's no exposed wiring or any type of gaps between the shell of the locomotive and the cab. You can see right down to the cab interior, which is fairly detailed for the most part. It does have a decent amount of separately applied details on the back head. You will get 2 crew figures. I'm not sure exactly if it's a prototype thing, and I don't know if it was not always a standard, but there's no red trim around any of the windows or on the cab roof, just on the tender decking. Coming down the side here in the tender, again, this is going to be the short tender. I think it just looks a lot better than the long haul does. One other thing, with Broadway limited imports, I've always noticed that I feel like they've always struggled to somehow get the deck plate to look half decent between the locomotive and tender, meaning this thing right there. I have it, the drawbar that they have on these now is a little bit more closer to the engine, like when you hook the tender up to the drawbar at the furthest setting away, which is what it's sitting at right now. And it's actually pretty prototypical, looks pretty close. Then you have just only one more step in on the drawbar, and it brings it even closer. It looks great, but obviously you can't make that tight of turns with it. But always, and even on my J1, and I want to show you guys that in a little bit, even on my J1, it never seems like that deck plate can ever sit like flat and look decent. It always feels like it's like pointed up all the time. And no wires are pushing up against it. Like, I have everything tucked down in, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast. So I wish that would be something they can work a little bit more on. Coming down the side of the tender, good rivet detail. Nice looking, realistic coil load. I might change some things about it. I want to add a little bit to make it look like it's more piled up in the back, but for the most part, the look and feel of it looks really good. There is really good detail on the tender legs. Nope, drop the phone. On the tender legs here, you have your water control valves, your tender brake handles, stuff like that. Like, everything is actually really well detailed in some of the spots that you're not always looking. Tender trucks, well, it's your standard tender trucks. I've already taken the wheels out and painted them, so they don't stand out that bad. Short tender has a doghouse on it. No real fancy detail for the doghouse or anything like that. It does have two separately applied grab irons that are on the side that kind of blend in with it right now. Might not be able to see it. There you go. Tender hatch detail looks good. Rivet detail across the top of the deck looks good. Swinging around to the back, it has really good detail actually on the back end of it. Might be a little dark to see here, but we can get this thing a little bit more into the light. The info plate on the back of the tender is actually really well done. A lot of the electrical piping coming out for the lights and stuff like that is really well done. Same good rear step detail as the Pilot has, with your grab iron, your footboards, your ladder detail. Everything looks great. Rear headlight, when it's in operation, works in reverse really good. The only thing that I'm curious about is why they didn't light the rear markers. They look like they're just jewels, just placed in there. They still look good aesthetically wise, but I wish they lit up. And they did include the little mini white light to the rear. Now, I'm not sure on the Pensy if you would see both of these, or if it was just one light or the other. I know the general requirement is just a single white light to the rear. So I'm not sure if you would see the single one, the little mini one, and the regular, like, large road light together on the tender at the same time. Not sure about that, but it's something I can look into. We're going to swing this thing around and look at the farm side. Nothing really different on the tender detail. Same thing as the other side. The short haul tender does have a water scoop at the bottom with some really decent underbody detail, along with some other separately applied tool hangers and grab irons and stuff like that on the bottom. On this side, this is the number I was telling you about. On camera, because it picked it up, it looks sharper than what it really is. But the 5 is kind of blown out, and the 4 is kind of blown out. It's just not as crisp as the other side is, which is something that I've picked up on. Again, good tender detail on the water legs on this side too. You have your water shut off for that water leg as well. Moving down this side, you have a lot more separately applied piping coming down the side here. These are going to be your controls going down to the feed water pump, which is down here. Air compressor, injector detail is really good. They didn't skip anything. I mean, the details that really matter and the extras is what, you know, Broadway Limited, I think, has always done really good at, is making sure that you have all your details out here, but also your, you know, behind the scenes details as well. It just makes it look more complete. But again, you have a compound compressor here, dual stage compound compressor, and then you have your water heater or water pump here with appropriate plumbing and piping. And then on this side, more separately applied steam lines coming off the steam dome and the sand dome, and same kind of flimsy handrails. Yeah, again, I'm going to see how well these things hold up. Again, valve gear looks really good, and this thing really runs nice. I have probably 30 cars on my layout right now that this thing pulls no problem. And the locomotive is fairly light. I haven't weighed it, but it's definitely lighter. It feels lighter anyways, for a locomotive of its size. The middle driver is bald, so you do have flanges on the first two, number 1 and 2, and then 4 and 5 have flanges on them, but the number 3 driver is bald, so it does help you get through some of those tighter curbs, and I think that's why they said, you know, originally it's 18-inch radius. Now, the problems that I've had with this is the smoke unit. When you get it first out of the box, it will have smoke already in it from the factory. And I don't know, because on these you can actually regulate and set the CB for the smoke unit itself, for 1, the fan, and 2, the heating element. And you can control the intensity of the smoke by controlling those 2 CVs. I don't know if mine was turned up too high or something, I don't know. But what happened was, and it was smoking like still pretty good yet, the smoke really wasn't even that thin, and all of a sudden I just noticed my smokestack was sitting like cockeyed like that. Well, it melted. This whole thing right here, this is all caved in, that's all caved in, and the other side's all caved in. So there's a switch that's underneath the engineer's side cab that you can turn off the smoke unit completely with, where you can turn it off with F7 on your DCC controller. But I just opted for the hardwire cutoff just to make sure it doesn't get turned back on again by accident. And so I took out the smoke box door, the smoke unit's right there, and I tried to push something in there while everything was still hot and pliable yet, to try to push it out, and it's not as bad as it was before. I called BLI about it, explained to them the issue. I guess this is the first time that they've heard about it, but I do have a work order for this thing to go down there and get fixed. I don't know how they're going to fix it. I don't know if they're just going to put a brand new shell on it. I don't know. But the biggest thing is that I can suggest is, when you get this thing out of the box, look up your CVs. It's in the manual for your smoke control, which in the booklet, all your CVs for all your independent controls for pretty much everything are back here, starting on page 24. And on the next page, CV 233, there it is, smoke unit, fan, normal chuff, all the smoke unit CVs are there, that you can knock that down to make sure that you don't melt the front of your engine like I did. So yeah, that's probably the biggest takeaway from this video, is watch out for their smoke unit, because it's hot. It smokes great when it works. It still kind of works right now, but not that great. I think the fan burned out because I don't get that good of a chuff with the revolutions. I just get smoke just kind of lazily coming out. But yeah, thankfully I can get it sent down to them, and they're going to fix it. So next part of the videos, we'll get this thing on the layout and do some sounds. Alright guys, so we're back on the layout. What I want to do is just run through some of the sounds that's laid out in the mapping in the book. Also go over some other things that I like and I don't like. Again, it's all going to be personal opinion. I'm not bashing Broadway Limited. I think they make a great product. But just some things that stood out to me. One is that when you turn on the dynamo on these, you hear the dynamo spool up, kick in, and then go away. It doesn't say running in the background. That's why I kind of really like my soundtracks decoders, because when you turn on the dynamo and the headlight kicks on, the dynamo is still running in the background. So when you're sitting there with the engine at an idle, you hear all the background sounds going on, and you hear the dynamo running like you would next to a locomotive just sitting there. So that's one thing I wish that they would change, and I'm not sure if it's something you can change with the programming or not. I've just been able to either change the volume of the dynamo, but anything other than that, don't know. But I just wish that's one thing that they would change on their sound files. I don't have a startup sequence programmed yet, so I just simply have the locomotive off, so we'll hit F8 and bring it on. So the one thing I've noticed with the Paragon 4 compared to Paragon 2, Paragon 3, is that in the tender, especially on this one, I believe they ported the coal load and have a second speaker facing up. So you get sound not only coming out from the bottom end of the tender where the normal cutouts are, but you also have sound being emitted up and out of the tender. I think it worked really good on this because it makes the sound sound like it's coming from the entire locomotive and not so much obviously like out of the tender like you can tell on a lot of other models out there. The background noises that you get at an idle are really good. You hear the air compressor going on right now. You'll hear the stoker kick in, and it sounds actually like a real stoker, an auger, you know, screw being ran. And you get some general clicks and clanks of somebody doing something. There's the stoker now. And that's not pressing anything, that's all automated in the background. But I'll first start off by turning the headlight on. You'll kind of hear what I'm talking about with dynamo, how it just spools up and then goes away. And that's it. So again, that's just one thing I wish that they would be able to program to keep it going in the background. I have set the bell. You can go through and set your bell type, your bell rate. Going through and set all that to kind of how I want it set up, so we'll do the bell first. Standard Pensy, you know, auto rang bell, and I really like how at the end when you turn it off, it kind of clings and clangs one or two more times depending on how the bell is sitting. You know, when it's getting air cut off to it, it just kind of swings and hits one or two extra times. You know, that actually sounds pretty realistic. We'll do the whistle. It is a quotable whistle to a point on the NC powered cab that I have. If you do one short, it sounds like a really nice one short, and if you hold down the whistle button and then let off it and hit it again real quick and let off it, it'll play an alternate ending to the whistle, and everyone's a little bit different, so it sounds pretty realistic. F3 is going to be your standard coupling, uncoupling. F4 is the air pump, which is already running. F5 is when you're stopped, it'll do the blowdown. And also F5 is when you're running, it'll increase your intensity of the chuff. It'll make it sound like it's working a little bit harder. F6 is your water fill. Sounds really good. We'll cut that off. F7 is going to be your smoke unit on or off. I have the switch off under the cab, so I don't have to worry about that. F8, your standard volume on or off. F9 is going to be your startup or shutdown sequence, which I don't have programmed yet. F10 is going to be the auger, which is running right now. F11 will give you your water injectors. Which is that. Let's see, F12 is going to be when you're stopped, you're going to be setting up your brakes, so we'll do that. It'll be hand brakes. F13 is going to be the crossing logic for road crossing, two longs, one short and a long. Listen to that. And then F14 and 15 are going to be different types of passenger and freight announcements. F16 is maintenance sounds. We'll do F17, which is the radio.
control transmission. Try it again, over.
And then you have F18, 19, 20, all different types of background sounds that you can play. But we'll get it moving here for a little bit. The cylinder cocks will open up as you start to move, and then they'll automatically shut off. It's not something that you can control like on some other engines, but here we go. And then when you do change directions, the front headlight will end up just totally going out, and then the rear's on. I believe that there's a way you can change that when you go into pro lighting mode. On this, you can change your lighting functions to where you can keep both headlights on, but one dims, but doesn't totally ever go out. And then when you go back and forward, the front headlight will come back on. It dims when you're stopped, and then as soon as you get input to go a direction for forward, it goes bright. And then we'll mute that. So that is the Paragon 4 I1SA, and it's again a greatly heavily detailed packed locomotive. Just has some things that I personally, count as things, areas of improvement. Definitely still worth the money. These retail anywhere between $400 to $450, depending on where you shop and get one. This one was $399 at my most closest and local hobby store. I do want to hit on the J1 real quick. I finally got it working again. The gears, there's a gear tower right here in the middle. Finally went kaput. I was at the club one day running it, and everything seemed like it was working great and fine. I brought it home. I got it on a layout, was running it for like maybe 5 minutes, and all of a sudden it just started locking up and binding up and acting really, really sketchy. So what I discovered is the gears in here. There's your main worm gear coming off the motor, and then it goes down to a stepper gear. It's a big gear with a small little gear on the other side of it. It's all part of the same gear. And then that small gear goes down to a second gear, which is then what makes contact with the gear that's on the driving axle. The gears were worn to where when they were sitting on their appropriate pin, the inner part of the gear was actually worn out to where it wasn't true anymore, and it was wobbling. It was just enough to cause them to offset and not mesh. The crazy thing is that it worked great in reverse. It would go backwards all day without a hiccup. As soon as you try to go forward, it just didn't want to do anything. And I guess it was because when the worm gear would spin for reverse, it would actually pull the gears in to where it wouldn't allow them, because of the force of the worm gear onto the other gears, wouldn't allow them to slide out of place. But as soon as you would try to go the other way forward, it would push everything out. So I got a brand new gear set for this from BLI, which amazingly, for this locomotive being over 15 years old, they still had. And I messed with the shim that's on the motor. Underneath the motor mount, there's a little plastic shim that you can take out, and I took that out. So I made really good contact with the worm gear to the new gears, and things are working really good. Runs like a champ. Runs like it's brand new. So actually, I would like to show you the difference if you're not familiar with soundtracks compared to the BLI, what I was talking about earlier with the dynamo and background sounds. So we'll start 6438 up. Air compressor starts cycling. I just like how it just stays on in the background And I have this locomotive all programmed and set up with background noises that come on really often, from firing to the blowdown, or not blowdown, the pop-offs and stuff like that. And this is the soundtracks, what is it, Big Steam 2, the TSU 2200 that I have in it, hardwired. Really good decoder, really customizable. You can do anything with it. So that is my review on the 210 from Broadway Limited, and just my little update on the J1. This is one of the original QSI locomotives. So that's that, and I will be sure to post more videos whenever I got something coming up.